Well, hello, and welcome to episode 196 of Drink the Movies. I'm Brian here, as always, with Michaela. And Michaela here on Drink the Movies. Every, Christmas time, every December, we do a lot of holiday films, right? And included in those holiday films have been some of the all-time classics, right? We did like the old original Christmas Carol. We did A White Christmas. We did on our very first season of Drink the Movies, It's a Wonderful Life, one of my favorite films of them all. And this year, we're going to be covering another classic and it comes via a request. But today we're talking about Miracle on 34th Street.
That we are. Now, we're not talking about just any Miracle on 34th Street. We're talking about the original 1947 version
We're
with
talking about
Maureen
the Miracle on
O'Hara,
34th Street,
the Miracle on 34th Street.
not this new shenanigans.
Yeah, there's been like,
New,
I
it's
don't
like 30
know.
years old, but
Yeah, okay. So the new one's 30 years old, but then there was one in the 70s, the one in the 80s. I remember like that was on
Mhm.
TV that I watched as a kid. And my dad had to tell me, he was like, all of these versions stuck compared to the original. The original doesn't even use like a miracle. There's no like crazy thing that Santa has to do to prove himself. It's
Mhm.
all, well, we'll get to it. But yes, we're talking about Miracle on 34th Street. And this is for Susie. Susie is a night nurse who helped me in my surgery that I had last week or a couple weeks ago now. And her favorite drink is vodka. So we're going to create a vodka drink just for her. But this was her favorite Christmas movie. And as I was freaking out, coming off of my major anesthesia that I had, she told me all about how she loved this film. And I don't remember seeing this in like
Ooh,
the original. I
wow.
remember my dad ranting and raving about how all the ones that I was watching weren't the original and weren't as good as the original. But
That's
I don't
fair.
remember seeing the original. So I was really excited to be able to add this to our list. But Nurse Susie, this is for you, darling. Happy Christmas.
That's right. Susie and your dad were right all along, and we're going to be talking about all of that stuff. So let's go ahead and do this, Michaela. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. We're going to mix up a cocktail that is going to be reminiscent of Santa Claus for sure. We'll get some vodka in there as well and see what we think about this one. So let's do that. Let's take a quick break, mix up some ginger syrup, and we'll be right back to mix up this week's drink.
So, Brian, you were the one who found the original version of this drink because we wanted something that was very like Christmassy, that
Hmm.
was reminiscent of something 1947, which
Yes.
means it probably was going to have a dark liquor in it instead of a light liquor. But my nurse Susie loves vodka. So I made like a Michaela switch to it. And we're going to talk about both versions of this drink. And I am talking about the Santa Claus Smash.
That's right. Yeah, the Santa Claus Smasher comes from mybartender.com. And I thought this would be really good, right? Obviously, Santa Claus right there in the name. Santa Claus getting smashed. That's like the first scene in the movie, basically. Pretty much that fake Santa Claus at the Macy's Day Parade. So that sounded good. And yeah, this sounded like it was going to hit all of those notes. The one I made here was with bourbon. That was from the actual recipe, but I thought this would be really, really good. Mixing it up a couple of different ways. We're going to talk about that. But first, we need to talk about a ginger syrup because you're going to need that. And a ginger syrup is delicious and amazing. Maybe you should just always have one of these on hand because you could ginger up, any sort of cocktail that you want to. And we're going to need an ounce of it. So go ahead into a saucepan, put in equal amounts of sugar and water, and then get yourself one of those little hands of ginger, right? Or a couple like little fingers of ginger. Go ahead and peel those and then just kind of roughly chop them up into a couple of little chunks. Get your sugar to dissolve, toss your ginger in there, and then let it steep as long as you want to get as much ginger, like that gingery heat, out of it as you want.
Mm.
I did about a half hour for mine, which is kind of subtle in the ginger, to be quite honest. But you could let it go as long or as short as you want. But going to want to impart some ginger flavor into that syrup. Go ahead and bottle that, stick it in the fridge, and like I said, use it in everything, especially use it in the Santa Claus Smash.
Absolutely. And then when you're ready to go on this journey, we're going to do the original. I'm going to talk about what the original recipe of the Santa Claus Smash is. What you're going to do is you're going to get a shaker tin out. Don't put ice in it yet. What you're going to do is you're going to add 2 ounces of your favorite bourbon, 1 ounce of this ginger syrup that I've just made, 2.5 ounces of pomegranate juice, half an ounce of fresh lemon juice, and what you're going to do is you're then going to add the ice to it. You're going to shake it until it's really, really cold. Then you're going to strain it into a rocks glass or a tumbler filled with fresh ice. And then you're going to top it with your favorite ginger beer, pouring gently because you want to preserve that fizz. That's the whole point of a smash.
Hmm.
And then you can garnish it with like fresh mint leaves or some sprinkle of the little pomegranates if you were making your pomegranate juice from scratch. If you were, God bless you, because that stuff takes ages to
Yes.
do. I've done it. It's and if
It takes
or
10
maybe even
seconds to
like
buy the little thing of it.
well, and here's the thing. I would even do like cranberries in this, even though there's no cranberry in it. I because
Mm,
cranberries are so pretty and they're easier to find
yeah. And they float better
this time of year.
than a pomegranate, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But then you're going to drink this and you're going to love it. Now, for Miss
Yes.
Susie, you don't have to use bourbon, honey. You can use your favorite vodka. If you want it to be sweeter, you could use like a flavored vodka, but I would really stick to like whatever your straight favorite is, whether it's Tito's or Grey Goose or whatever. Go ahead and just do 2 ounces of bourbon for 2 ounces of vodka.
Hmm.
It's going to lighten up this drink a little bit. It's going to look a little bit brighter in the red rather than a darker, richer red color. But it's going to
Hmm.
taste really interesting. I love a good smash, but I think I prefer it with the vodka just
Hmm.
because I don't know. Right now, I mean, I just had surgery a couple weeks ago, so I need to lay off the darkness, the deep richness of a hard liquor for a little while. But
There you go.
I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I like the inclusion of the vodka here in this. It basically turns it into like a cosmopolitan mule is basically what that is right there, right? With the pomegranate juice and then the vodka and the ginger flavors there. Jameson and ginger ale is one of my favorite cocktails of them all. Also, a dark and stormy is one of my favorite cocktails of them all, which is dark rum or blackstrap rum and ginger beer. So you could totally mix this up if you don't want to do the bourbon, if you don't want to do the vodka. You could definitely try this out with a dark rum. I think that would be equally as delicious here. So kind of, dealer's choice when it comes to that liquor component. So, or you could totally, just do the pomegranate juice, the ginger syrup, lemon, and your ginger beer and make this into a mocktail. That would be really good as well. So, maybe you've got a little Susan Walker in your life that you need to mix something up for. So go ahead and skip the booze altogether there. So, Michaela, this was delicious. It was a really good one. Go check it out. Make it. It's going to be perfect. It looks beautiful. And it's real simple to make. Like I said, just get that ginger syrup on hand for everything. So now that we have this, Michaela, we need to go rectify some wrongs and that you have never seen this before. We need to chat about it. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back to chat about this week's film, Miracle on 34th Street.
What is your name?
Kris Kringle,
Where do you live?
that's what this hearing will decide.
A very sound answer, Mr. Kringle.
Do you believe that you're Santa Claus?
Of course.
State rests, Your Honor.
Spoiler warning for Miracle on 34th Street. If you've not seen the 1947 version of Miracle on 34th Street, then you actually haven't seen A Miracle on 34th Street because the miracle is that it's actually not kind of a miracle. It's really amazing. But we're going to talk about all of the things that happen in this version, which is apparently very different than a lot of the other versions that are out there. I have to say,
Hmm.
when I was talking movies in my delirious state with my nurse, Susie, she made very, very sure to tell me that it was this version that she liked and not any of the others. So I think the Miracle on 34th Street fandom is really just going to pretend that all of the others don't exist. But
There you
you
go.
audience members have been warned. We're going to talk about it. So if you don't want to know what the secret is or what happens at the end, you should press pause, go make yourself up a Santa Claus smash with either bourbon or vodka, and then you can come back and we can chat about it.
Yeah, I don't know that there are Miracle on 34th like gatekeeper fans out there, but yeah, definitely, definitely always want to go back to the original. And it's also good to know, Michaela, that even in your, your your drugged up state, you still have the same exact conversations as you do in your normal state. So that's good to know as well out there. So if you've not seen this, you've had plenty of time. Michaela, I'm talking to you. This was released in 1947. It was directed by George Seaton and it stars Maureen O'Hara as Macy's parade coordinator and non-believer Doris Walker, John Payne as neighbor slash babysitter slash attorney extraordinaire Fred Gailey, a very young Natalie Wood as Susan Walker, the little girl who just might believe, and Edmund Gwenn plays Kris Kringle, the one and only Santa Claus.
One and only Santa Claus. Yeah, this film is as old as my dad. which
Hmm.
was really interesting to me when I first started watching it because the film quality is actually pretty spectacular. Now, I see in a lot of the ads for this one that it's in color, like it looks like it's in color or it's been colorized. I did not watch the
Hmm.
colorized version. I
Yep.
am a purist, and which is weird because when I was a kid, I hated black and white movies simply because they were black and white. I thought they were boring. I don't
Okay.
know. Joke was on me, but I watched the original non-colorized version of this. So if there is a colorized version out there and you want to tell us about it on Drink the Movies, happy to hear it. But
That's
we're
true.
talking.
They colorized it. It was one of the first films that they ever colorized in 1985, and then it was released onto VHS, I think, in like 1993. Yeah, there's a colorized version of this. I was watching It's a Wonderful Life on Amazon Prime. They have a colorized version of that. Out of here. Keep your colors.
Keep your look. The technology is great. I mean, I think that's really cool that they tried to go back and do that. And actually, fun fact: I met a guy who was a descendant. He was like the grandson of the gentleman who created the algorithm that took the shades of gray and allocated them a certain color.
Oh,
And
okay.
so during the colorization process of old, so they would take like a black and white picture, and depending on how that shade looked,
Hmm.
they would attribute it to a color. And so then they could, it was what they used, I guess, in the old days to colorize things. I learned a little bit more about that during the Animation Museum when we were in the Motion Picture Arts and Science Museum in LA. But
Okay.
really, really cool the way they did that. But no, I didn't want to watch that. I wanted to watch the black and white version.
Yeah, there you go. It's probably on a quick aside, and then we'll get back to the movie, I promise. It probably is neat, I guess, from a historical like costuming perspective to see like what those things actually look like. So there you go. This was based on a story by the same name that came out that same year, actually. So they turned this around pretty quick. It was by Valentine Davies, and this movie was pretty heralded in its day. It was nominated for four Academy Awards. It won three of those. It lost for Best Picture, but it did win Best Writing and Screenplay by George Seaton, the director there. The original story for Valentine Davies and the supporting actor for Edmund Gween. So, Kris Kringle can not only, get all the mail in the world delivered to him, he can also win Academy Awards.
You certainly can, and rightfully so. So let's get into it. This film starts with the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in 1947, which I think is
Hmm.
pretty cool.
Very
The
cool.
Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade has been going on for a long, long time, and for anybody who doesn't know, if you're not in America or you've been living under a rock, it happens every day, every Thanksgiving Day, and it always ends with a float with Santa Claus on it. That's what happens because it
Hmm.
is truly
Hmm.
the heralding of the Christmas season for America. It's when we get to start actually, celebrating Christmas. Never a moment too soon. But unfortunately, on this particular morning, the Santa that they have hired to be the Santa is rip roaring drunk. I mean, we could have just had like the bottle of bourbon as the drink, or what the
That's true.
bottle of whiskey, or whatever it is that he was holding. But he's just feeling no pain. He is nice and warm. He's so warm. He smells. It's really bad. And this really sweet old man is talking to him and discovers that he's drunk and is very indignant and is complaining. He's like, "This is not okay. You can't be around kids. You can't be waving to kids. And no way." And so Doris Walker, who is the played by Maureen O'Hara, she's like running this whole shindig, which I think is amazing. She immediately fires this guy, but then she's like, "What are we gonna do?" And this sweet little old man who's like already was trying to like tell the Santa guy how to whip the reindeer. He's like, "Oh, I can do it. Sure, no
I
problem."
can I can do it. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love this guy. He's super drunk. I tried to figure out what bottle it was that he was holding, but in 1947, probably still not being manufactured. It was probably just a prop there for this film. Yeah, I love that. I love kind of this beginning here of the parade. Apparently, it's actual like footage of the 1946 Macy's Day Parade that they're using in that. So this movie is not only monumental in terms of Christmas films and historical films, it's also a document of the 1946 Macy's Day Parade. So that's pretty cool there. You mentioned it starts with the music or with with the parade. That's not entirely true because it starts with Santa Claus walking down the street and he goes by like a shop attendant who's making up his Christmas window, putting the reindeers there in front of Santa's sleigh, and he like knocks on the window. He's like, "Excuse me, you're doing that wrong, guy." And of course, this
Yeah,
guy's
that's
like,
true.
Okay, okay, crazy guy." But yeah, Kris Kringle is going to take up the reins, as it were, of the Santa Claus and the Macy's Day parade. Everyone is so smitten with the Santa Claus, including the very young Susan Walker, who's watching from the apartment, that Kris Kringle is going to get offered a job to continue on playing Santa Claus at Macy's at the department store there in New York City. But before we go and talk about his job there at Macy's, let's go and go home and talk about little Susie Walker and the neighbor, Fred Gailey.
Yeah, so the 2024 Michaela was watching this, and I was immediately like, "Wait a minute, what?" Because Doris Walker comes home, and like the caretaker is like, "Oh, Susie's over watching the parade with good old Mr. Gailey," and um, they're Doris is like, "Well, that's a weird. I've never met this man. I mean, there's no way we would let a kid go off with a stranger, especially with the idea of going to see the parade." But this is
Mm.
completely innocent. He has this really beautiful apartment that has these floor to ceiling windows where little Susie can watch. But Susie is not. She's not filled with the wonder that you would think she thinks. It's much more engineering a brain, right? She's like, this is really cool the way they have these um, floats created and how they hire the Santa. And Mr. Gailey is really shocked because she doesn't believe in Santa Claus. She knows that this isn't the real Santa, that this is someone that Doris has just hired. They talk about like a fairy tale and like giants, and she doesn't believe in giants. She doesn't believe in any sort of fairy tales. And Mr. Gailey, Fred Gailey, is like, that's odd. But he and Susie have kind of this really neat connection. Um, and it's obvious that Fred is really interested in Doris. So he kind of concocts this way of Susie asking if they can have dinner all together. And
Yeah.
Doris sees right through it. I love it. But at the same time, she kind of thinks it's sweet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, little Susie there, asks if he can come over for Christmas dinner there, and then she's like, "Did I ask right? Did I do it right?" And he's like, "I don't know. Your mom didn't say yes or no yet." So then, of course, Doris, invites him over for Christmas dinner there. So yeah, of course, she did it right. So I love that. So let's go back into Macy's then a little bit here, Michaela. So we've got Chris. There, who's just finished up putting on a smashing performance at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. He is brought in to serve as the Santa Claus uh, for um, for Macy's, right? To sit there in the store and to give all the kids, go get your sit on Santa Claus's lap and take a picture and tell them what you want for Christmas, all that stuff. And I really like this first scene, right? Because like the head of um, the toy department there at Macy's. His name is Julian Shellhammer, I think is his name. He's played by
Yep.
Philip Tung. Comes in and he's like, all right, here's like the list of toys, and you need to make sure that you're pointing them in the direction of these toys. And Kris Kringle's like, what are you even talking about? I come to places like this so I can, get a pulse for what kids are really wanting to see how the toy sales are going. I love that Santa Claus is really like he's like some sort of like auditor, like a Christmas auditor
Right.
here for the store. I love that. But he's like, I'm not going to do that. He's like, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to listen to these kids tell me what they want. And then if we don't have it here at Macy's, I'm going to tell them to go to a different store and get it. Because that's what you should do at Christmas, right? It's helping people out. Holidays are stressful
That's right.
enough. Send them down the store to their
That's right.
competitor. That's going to rub some people the wrong way, except for all those customers now who are diehard Macy's fans.
Yeah, the only people it rubs the wrong way is Mr. Shellhammer. At first, he's freaking out. He's legitimately like about to go like up to RH Macy's uh, office and like tell him to fire this Santa on the spot. And then a mom comes and talks him down and says, "This is the most amazing customer service I've ever had. We should think about that." She's like, I'm going to go to Gimbel's because that's the store that has the toy, but everything else I'm going to do with my business here at Macy's. And I think that's really interesting. I love the scene that you talk about where the guy reads off the list. Santa also meets this kid young guy named Alfred who's like sweeping floors, and they talk about the commercialism of Christmas. And I think that's really interesting because this film was made in 1947, and what are we still talking about to this day, like the commercialism of Christmas? I'm sad to say that it hasn't quite gone away, but I do believe that this whole idea of commercialism versus like doing what is just right for children really kind of makes this the whole legendary, story that it is.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely, and it's going to really kind of, I guess, capture the hearts and minds of all the people who are coming in to the shop, right? To be told by this biggest place to go somewhere else. That's creating some Christmas magic. I love there's like a scene with Shellhammer's in like his office, and like his assistant comes in because there's like 100 like ladies out in his like waiting room to come in and tell him like how great of a job this new Santa Claus is doing it, and he's like, I'm tired of hearing from them. That's not great. That's not great. But it turns out that this is good for business, right? Mr. Macy is like, who's that Santa Claus? He's doing a heck of a job. Let's do that. I really love this because it's very like old timey feeling, but they're taking like all of the like the advertisements for the other like toy departments from around town and like pasting them into a book, and then Mr. Shellhammer is like going through and showing people like where to get their toys and stuff, like what's available elsewhere and stuff like that. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And meanwhile, of course, you have Susan Walker, who's there. Her mom Doris has taught her, not to believe in fairy tales and fantastical things. But Fred, there thinks that some fantastical things are okay for a kid. Let that imagination run wild. And he says maybe it's a good idea for me to take you to see Santa Claus. Maybe that's going to open your mind up a little bit. You don't have to be such a stick in the mud. Little Susie, let's go and talk to Santa Claus. And she's not really having it. She's like, all right, fine, I'll go, I guess, to appease you guy that's trying to date my mom. But I'm still not into the Santa Claus sort of bit. So she goes up to Santa Claus. She's still not really all that smitten, but she sees Kris there. You have a little girl come in who has just gotten to the United States from the Netherlands, and of course she can't speak English. You just got here from the Netherlands. You can't speak English. She can speak Dutch. Kris can speak Dutch too.
Oh yeah, because he's Santa Claus and he can speak all the languages. I love this scene. I think it's so great. The wonder that is on the little girl, the little orphan girl's face when he starts to speak to her in Dutch is amazing. And Susan is also amazed. But Doris sees all this happening, and she is not impressed with Fred. She is not happy that Susan is being exposed to this, and that now she could possibly be thinking that maybe Santa Claus is real and this guy's the real deal. It's interesting because she tells Susie to like go look at Santa Claus so that she can go and argue with Fred aside. I think that that's really interesting because they didn't want to talk about it in front of her. But Fred Gailey is really kind of incredulous. He's like, why wouldn't you want her to believe in anything? And it turns out that the cards that have been dealt to Doris have not been great. She was married to Susan's father, but they divorced when Susan was like a baby, and we've never seen or heard from him since. And that must have really crushed her because she doesn't want Susan to believe in anything that is a cause of faith. So because that would just leave her to be open to being disappointed. And so we kind of learn about this at that point, and that explains why she doesn't want her to believe in Santa Claus, because heaven forbid if that's not true.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got that. We've got Kris there. He's doing a heck of a job. You've got a little bit of a mix up in feelings, right? Is this guy really Santa Claus? Is he not really Santa Claus? I don't know for sure, but we know that he has to commute a long way to get to work every day. We need to address that, right? We don't know if he's Santa Claus or not, but we can't have him, be going like that far overnight. Maybe he won't make it into work the next day. That's not good. Maybe he needs kind of a caretaker sort of a thing. So they're trying to decide what to do with Kris Kringle. On one hand, logistically, where can he go stay? And of course, Fred's got an extra bed right next to his. He can come and Kris can come and stay with him, which is going to open the door then for Kris to have some more dialogue with Fred and with Susan there to talk about some magical things about using your imagination, right? I think he has like a conversation with Susan about playing with the other kids, and she's like, those other kids are lame. They're always making stuff up, and he's of course Kris Kringle's like, making stuff up, that's the best. What are you even talking about, Susan Walker?
Right.
Maybe we should do that. So you got that going on one hand, and then on the other hand, you have Doris is like, I don't know about this guy. He's starting to rub me the wrong way. Keeps talking about how he's really Santa Claus. I don't know about that. Maybe we should have him. Maybe we should just can him, right? Macy's like, no, we can't do that. He's making us too much money. What we can do is we could probably get him evaluated by a psychiatrist to see if maybe he needs to be committed, after Christmas.
Right. Heaven forbid we stop the commercialization for a minute before we have to. What I find interesting is while this is going on, everybody, and I mean everybody that meets Kris Kringle, except for this said psychiatrist that sits in, I don't know what Macy's doing hiring a psychiatrist on their payroll. I don't know what that's about, but everybody just seems to really like Kris Kringle, right? They don't really care. They talk a lot about old people, right? That's the term that they use, and how old people could be senile and maybe they believe things that aren't exactly true. But he's harmless and he brings so much joy to people, and he's making the company a ton of money. So everyone's kind of willing to turn a blind eye. Except they do say, well, before we get him like really evaluated, let's take him to this quack who we've employed to do like intelligence tests. I don't know if they actually did that back in the day, but that sounds real wrong. And this guy, what's his name? He's the worst. Oh my gosh. He's like, Porter Hall. He plays Mr. Sawyer. He's awful. He's like biting his fingernails and he's like picking out the hair. Like he's obviously got a lot of anxiety or very anxious, and he is interviewing Kris Kringle, and Kris Kringle's not following for it at all. He gets him kicked out of the office, but Mr. Sawyer says, nope, I don't like him. I think he's going to become violent. And everybody else is like, dude, this guy's the sweetest, most gentle man ever. You're out of your mind. And he's like, I'm warning you, this is going to end poorly.
That's right.
But
Yeah,
because of that,
don't upset a person in a in a point of authority, I guess, because they have your life in the strings, as it were. Yeah, like you said, Michaela, everyone is like, are you talking about this old guy, right? That's talking to kids about what they want for Christmas. You think that guy is a menace? But yeah, sure enough, he does think he's a menace, right? And he's going to put in a call to some buddies that's going to take into question whether Kris Kringle really is Santa Claus, and not like on a Macy's level, and not on like a childhood wonderment level, but literally in a court of law sort of level, right? So it's going to be, have to be determined here by this court whether Kris Kringle really is Santa Claus. Does he need to be sent away to somewhere in a padded room to live out his days as Kris Kringle pretending to be Santa Claus, or is he really Santa Claus? That's the crux of what we need to find out. I really love the judge here. I'm not sure his name, but he's got like I guess like his like political like advisor is there, and he's like, Judge, you can't take on this case. He's like, what are you, nuts? He's like either A, you're going to say that he's Santa Claus, which means that you're nuts, or you're going to say that he's not Santa Claus, which like destroys the hope and imagination for the whole world. You can't do this. Don't take on this case. But the judge is going to persevere. He's going to sit on the bench, and he's going to say that Kris Kringle is fit for trial. Let's do this, Michaela. Let's find out if he's really Santa Claus.
and what I find interesting here is that everyone, right? So Gene Lockhart is the Honorable Henry X. Harper, and he looks like a child in and of itself. He's got this baby face, even though he's probably in his 50s or 60s. And
he's very like cherubic
right?
looking. Yeah. As a
yeah,
judge, yeah.
But his own grandkids like won't hug him and kiss him goodnight because they're like, I can't believe that you would put Santa Claus on trial. And his wife is like, I think you should just.
Yeah.
It's
like, what's wrong with you,
despicable.
bozo?
You're horrible. You're a horrible person. And he's like in this really tough position because, I mean, honestly, he doesn't have a dog in this fight. He's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't think this is that big of a deal.
This came onto my desk. What do you want me to do?
What do you want me to do? And so even the prosecutor, who's Jerome Cowan, he's like, he's feeling the pressure, and everybody is kind of like, nah, I don't know. This seems to be a problem. And what ends up happening in the courtroom is it blows up because it's not just we're no longer there to see if this person is fit or competent, right? It's not about whether this Kris Kringle is insane. It's more, it turns into this whole idea of, is Santa Claus real? Yes or no? And is this person the Santa Claus? And so they go through this whole rigmarole where, Fred Gailey is the attorney representing Kris Kringle, and he has the prosecutor's own son go on trial and like go on
Mm-hmm.
the books saying, my daddy told me Santa Claus was absolutely real. So they kind of have to say, all right, well, Santa Claus might be real. That's fine. But are we sure that this is the Santa Claus? Is this the real guy? And that's when the miracle, as it were, starts to really happen.
That's right. And the miracle is the United States Postal Service. How do they deliver all of those letters every day? It boggles the mind to think about it for sure. And a lot of those letters that they deliver every December are letters to Santa Claus. The kids write, of course, even Susan writes him a letter, not to Santa Claus necessarily, but it's just to give her well wishes as he's potentially going to be locked away with the key thrown out there for pretending to be Santa Claus. But she writes him a letter, and the Postal Service is going to start delivering those letters. And who does the post office deliver Chris Santa Claus letters to? None other than Santa Claus, of course, right? So that's the argument that is being made. If Fred is going to come in and say, the United States Postal Service, say an arm of the government of the great United States of America, if they say that letters to Santa Claus need to be delivered to my client, Kris Kringle, then of course, who are you to argue with the post office, right? And of course, about that time, the judge is like, well, fine, here's this letter, if you can provide me with some more letters, I don't know if I'm buying all this, just because one letter comes in. And about that time, then he, whistles everyone in and they bring in, I don't know, like 100 bags of letters to Santa Claus, which is pretty awesome. They're, swarming over his desk. And who is the judge to go against the United States Postal Service? No one. He declares Kris Kringle is in fact Santa Claus, and there you go, official on the books. But we're still not all on board, right, Susan Walker?
Uh, so Susan, she spent a lot of extra time with this version of Santa or this Kris Kringle. And the thing that she had asked him for Christmas was a house, which is interesting because Santa does ask her. He says, why you have such a beautiful apartment? And she says, no, I want a house with a yard. I want it with a swing in the back. Um, and that's what I want. And she like shows him a picture even like, and he's like, all
He's like,
right,
oh,
I'll
you
see
want a
what I can do.
dollhouse? She's like,
Yeah,
no, Santa,
no,
quote unquote
this is a
Santa.
real big,
I want a real
yeah.
house, bro.
And I don't know. I have a kid who wants like 87,000 Legos, but at least they're the right size. They fit in my house. I don't have to like buy another house to give him what he wants. So this is a huge deal, even for this Kris Kringle. And so Christmas, it's right before Christmas, and he even says, this is going to be really hard, but Susan writes him a letter and says, I believe you. And even more importantly, Doris signs a postscript and says, I believe in you too. And so after the trial, they decide they're all going to spend Christmas together. And when they open the big doors and have all the kids run and look at the Christmas gifts, you see Susan is really disappointed because it's not there. There's no way that a house is going to fit under this Christmas tree.
It's true. Logistics there, little Susan, for sure. But yeah, no tree there. So of course she is heartbroken, as it were. And even, Chris says, during the trial, right? Just because a child doesn't get what they want for Christmas doesn't mean that Santa Claus isn't real, right? So that's no ding there. So everyone kind of gathers up for some kind of final little celebration sort of a thing, right? To see, Kris Kringle off. He's made it through Christmas. Thank you for your work and employ at Macy's. We've had record-breaking profits, no doubt. You can go back to wherever it was that you came from. You're not going to be locked away in a prison somewhere for being mentally unstable. So we're going to get together, have a little bit of a party, and then on the way home, as Fred and Doris are making their drive, they're going to pass by a little house, and that little house looks awfully familiar because it kind of looks like that one that Susan Walker asked for Christmas. Except this one's for sale.
This one is for sale. And it's interesting because as Chris leaves, this is Christmas Day because he's nowhere to be found on Christmas Eve. He says, oh, no, I can't have dinner. I've got things to do. But the one thing he does say as he leaves Fred and Doris is he gives them directions that says, oh, you're going to miss all the holiday traffic if you go this way. And so they're like coming to a stop. They're in the middle of a neighborhood and Susan just books it out of the car. I mean, was this before seatbelts? It was. So she doesn't even have to take a seatbelt off. She just says stop, and she rushes up this hill and she sees this house and she walks inside. And of course, Fred and Doris are like mortified. They go in and they're like, you can't do this. You can't just walk into someone's house, but she's looking all around and she says, "This is it. This is the house. My room is the exact way I thought it would be. I'm going to go outside and see if there is a swing." And sure enough, there is one. And Fred and Doris look at each other, and Fred says, "Hey, the house says it's for sale." Now they've bonded over the course of the last few weeks, so it's very clear that they're in love. Doris has shown her act of faith in falling in love again and believing in Santa and allowing herself to be vulnerable. And so it looks like Fred and Doris are getting married, and they're going to buy this house. And then they see something in the corner of the room.
That's right. Yeah, in the corner of this house that is for sale, that Susan Walker has so desperately wanted, is a cane. It doesn't have any sort of name, any sort of label, and only the imagination of, was that Chris's cane? Might have been. I don't know. And it turns out that Santa Claus was real all along, and that is the real miracle on 34th Street. It's not like a miracle like I'm gonna do something crazy. It's the miracle of believing in Santa Claus, of wanting to believe in him and believing in Santa Claus to be true. And like I said, it's the miracle of the Postal Service. So make sure you have your Christmas cards mailed out. If they're not done by now, then they're not going to make it in time. So Michaela, that is it. That is a miracle on 34th Street. It is brilliant and perfect, and I love it a lot. You never watched it. Let's talk about kind of the other ones, and then we're going to circle back to this. So they did like a radio adaptation for it, which I would really like to listen to. I'm sure there's probably a copy of it like on YouTube or something. Maybe I'll have to track one of those down, but it had a lot of the, original cast were in those. I really like, kind of the medium of radio dramas. That's interesting. Of course, there's been like stage plays and adaptations. There were television adaptations, 1955, 1959, 1973. And then of course there was the more recent, quote unquote, recent remake, which came out in 1994, starred Richard Attenborough as Chris in that one. And I think I had seen that one maybe once, but I want to circle this back to you, Michaela, as you mentioned, kind of at the top that you'd seen some of these other sort of adaptations of this, but never necessarily this one, the first one, the original one here. So what has changed in your life? Was there a miracle that occurred within you watching Miracle on 34th Street last night?
Yes, actually there was. And I'm so glad you asked, Brian, because I've been thinking about this for a few hours now, how to adequately say it. It is a miracle. This was a miracle. And the miracle was that even though there was one person that was desperate to still be kind of this curmudgeon-y character that was having some personal problems of their own, that wanted to ruin things for everybody else. And when I'm talking about Mr. Porter or Mr. Sawyer, sorry, Mr. Sawyer was even telling poor Alfred, the kid who was sweeping the floors, that, the reason why he wanted to give gifts and the reason why he wanted to help children was because he himself was repressed and had something wrong with him. And, there are always going to be people like that are just not going to want to be happy. They're perfectly happy being miserable. But the miracle of this was that even despite of all of that, all of these very real, unmiracly things took place. And what I'm talking about are the scenes where the kids and the parents and the spouses of the people who were in these places of power are putting pressure to do the right thing. Even the people that are in those positions are like, I really think I should be doing the right thing. We got to figure this out, but I have to save face, right? And giving into that humanity. But also like the Postal Service, there's a scene where they're sorting out mail and they're like, oh, there's another mail letter for Santa. There's another letter for Santa. And they get this idea. It's a perfectly legitimate idea. That's not a miracle. That's not something that really defies earth or physics or the laws of science. It just is something that remains in the human heart. And when they make the decision to send all of that mail to this particular person as Santa Claus, that's where the miracle is. The miracle is what happens in your heart. And I really love that because it's so much better to me than some of the other ones that show, like the reindeer flying at the end, or, that Santa is up, looking down from his sleigh and waving at, the scene that he's created. And right. I think that's fine for kids maybe, but this was so much more subtle, but also, in my opinion, ran much longer in terms of like the faithfulness and the vulnerability that it gives us.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it does an amazing job of, painting that, the miracle is something that's taking place within all of this because Santa Claus is an ideal and something to strive to and to believe in, right? It's not, necessarily at the end of the day that there are, flying reindeer that you can see and witness in person, right? That's not really what makes Santa Claus, take up, residency in our hearts, even for one day a year. And we could talk all day about whether that should happen more often through the year than not. As for me, I watched this, periodically as a kid growing up, right? It was one of those things that'd be on TV all the time, being one of these classic films, of course, but I never really watched it with any sort of like I don't know, like watchfulness or appreciation for it until a little bit more recently. I'd say probably I don't know, about 10, 12 years ago. I saw this. I think I was at my in-laws' house and it was on TV and I watched it and kind of at that point really fell in love with it and it became something then that I would watch every year. I had seen the 1994 version of it and yeah, I think that it's perfectly fine. Like it's a nice retelling of it, but it doesn't capture the true magic and essence, I think, of what that original story intended to convey. And I think that this one does it, in spades. The acting here is great. The writing is amazing for 1947. I love it. I love kind of the the little like quippiness to it. I love kind of the little back and forths, that is very much, a product of its time. But I love that so much. Natalie Wood was amazing as Susan Walker. I really love her character in this. And then, Edmund Gwenn playing Kris Kringle is just absolutely fantastic and well warranted of the Academy Award there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. This is definitely going in and it's becoming a yearly thing. My kiddo loved it. We woke up this morning for breakfast and he wanted to watch it again, which I think is really telling. I mean, if the story is compelling enough, I guess it doesn't matter if it's in black and white or color. Boo on me as a child.
There you go. Absolutely. So that is going to wrap it up for Miracle on 34th Street. Let us know at home if you have watched this one recently, if you watch it every year. Let us know if you like any of the adaptations better than the original. And let us know if you mix up a Santa Claus smash to have along the way. You can do that. You can send us pictures of your cocktails. Let us know about your thoughts on the movie, all that stuff. You can do that on our social medias. It's at Drink the Movies on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky and Facebook.com/Drink the Movies. If you want to see episode recaps, see the pictures of the cocktail we made, this one was really pretty, so make sure you check that out. On the website is www.drinkthemovies.com. We have episode recaps. We have the recipes for all 196 of these episodes that we've done now. So go and check that out. And it also has links to Drink the Video Games. It has links to our merchandise shop, and it has links to our Patreon, patreon.com/drink the movies. That's where you get bonus content. We do extra hangouts. We do extra episodes. I'm talking about questionable Christmas movies that Michaela has picked for me all month long. That has been a lot of fun, and we appreciate our patrons over there so much. So, Michaela, they've done all that. They've checked out the website. They've told us about the cocktails they're having for Christmas. Where can they subscribe to the podcast?
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, Near Pods, anywhere where your rectangle is letting you listen right now. I guarantee there's a subscribe button and you can press it and you'll get 2 drops a week. You get our lobby bar, which is quick and easy guide to what's happening in the movie and series world today with an easy cocktail. And then you get the deep dives like we're doing right now. This is the best job in the world, everybody, and we can't do it without your support. So if you're liking what you're hearing, you can leave us a 5-star review. You can share us on all the social medias. Everything that you do helps spread the love of movies and cocktails, and it really helps us get all the Drink the Movies goodness out there.
Absolutely. So that is going to wrap it up for A Miracle on 34th Street. Thank you so much for tuning in to this one. We hope you've enjoyed our holiday coverage so far, and we have one more holiday film coming everyone's way next week as we make our way through to Christmas. So with that, Michaela, let's go grab some bourbon or vodka, mix up another one of these. We'll settle in for a long winter's nap, and we'll be back to talk to everyone next time on Drink
the
the
Movies. Thanks for taking care of me, Nurse Susie. Merry Christmas.